Okay, thank you, and welcome to the meeting today, members. We are now being broadcast online and throughout Parliament building, so just to remind you to keep your phone on silent. So I'm just going to proceed with the agenda. So we have apologies today from Sinead, and I think that Claire is hopefully going to be joining us online shortly. Any declarations of interest to declare? No? Okay. So, Chairperson's business then, just to advise that I have accepted an invitation to attend the next meeting of the Interparliamentary Forum, which will be held in Westminster on the 12th of June. So, Douglas Alexander, Minister of State for Trade Policy and Economic Security, and the Minister at the Cabinet Office will be attending, and plans to discuss the Internal Market Act review, common frameworks and the relationship between the UK Government and the devolved administrations. A representative from the UK delegation of the UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Association will also be attending to provide an update on their work. So I think, is the Chair of the Finance Committee attending as well?
Chairperson of the Finance Committee, yes.
Okay, so we'll be able to report back after.
Be interested to hear the report back on that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so item 4, draft minutes. So members, you'll find these on pages 6 to 14 of your pack, and just ask, are you content that these are a true record? Okay, so we'll go ahead and sign those. So matters arising. So members, at last week's meeting, we were all given a hard copy of our draft response to an individual following correspondence received by the committee. Members were asked to provide any suggestions for amendments to this draft response by Friday. I don't think any suggestions were received, although I went back to say I was content. Are others content, or would people like to discuss the draft letter? If so, we would have to go
Content, Paula?
Okay, content. I think there's content across the room.
Content,
Okay,
thank you.
We'll go ahead and get that draft response issued. Okay, members, so we're going to move on to our substantive matter today, and that's an oral briefing on the update on the work of the overseas bureaus in Beijing, Washington and Brussels. So I would refer you to pages 17 to 19 of the pack for the clerk's brief, and pages 7 to 16 of the tabled pack for a briefing paper. So we're to welcome our guests to the room, and hopefully 2 of them will be joining online. So today we will have Tom Reid, who is a grade 3 of Intergovernmental and International Relations at the Executive Office. We have Richard Cushney, who is Director Councillor of the Northern Ireland Bureau in North America, and attending firstly we have
joined just yet, Claire, or Chair.
Neither have?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we can proceed anyway, but we will be joined shortly by here we are.
Yeah.
Kerry Curran, who's the Director of the Northern Ireland Bureau in China, and Aidan Connolly, who is the Director of the Northern Ireland Office in Brussels. So I see empty chairs. So I will maybe ask the members, the guests in the room, to proceed. So Tom, maybe would you like to start with some opening remarks?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm delighted to see Kerry's now joined us on
Yes.
screen, so hopefully it shouldn't be too long.
Good stuff, thanks.
So, thanks, Chair, as usual, for the opportunity to brief the committee today on the work of the Executive's 3 overseas bureau. As you say, I'm Tom Reid, Deputy Secretary and TEO, until very recently with responsibility for the overseas offices. So this is part of the handover process to the new Deputy Secretary that's come into the department. I'm accompanied today by Richard Cushney in person, our Director in Washington, and online we have Kerry and Aidan, who hopefully is not hiding under the table, will join us very shortly. So before passing over to each, if that's okay, to do a brief introduction on their areas, I thought it'd be helpful to set out the work of the Bureau in the wider context, yes. And I won't take long to do that.
Okay.
So the focus of our international engagement across the Executive and our agencies to date has really, it's been in showcasing who we are, what we have to offer. Also, it's about learning from others and building relations, but all of that is with the focus ultimately on securing benefits, whether that's investment, visitors, international students, or actually expertise in dealing with some of the challenges we have. Now, as a small outward-looking economy and society, that's critically important in supporting delivery of the Executive's wider ambitions for our people and our place. Securing the benefits, however, takes time, and the starting point of that is developing the positive relations and perceptions that allow us to move to the next stage in the relationships, and it's why investing so much time in building relations and raising our profile are the key cornerstone of our international engagement and the work of each of the Bureau. I think it's important to highlight in that regard that the Bureau, whilst they sit within TEO structures, they're very much an executive-wide resource, and they're part of a wider global network, including almost 30 Invest NI offices and our international relations team in Belfast, which leads on inward visits to Northern Ireland. So Kerry, Aidan and Richard work very, very closely with colleagues across departments, their arm's length body, and indeed key stakeholders across education, business and civic society. In that context, the three Bureau, on behalf of the Executive, lead on government-to-government relations with the respective regions. But critically, they're located at the heart of the world's three largest economies and diplomatic hubs, and that provides unique opportunities for the Bureau to work closely together in seeking to raise our profile, not only in the areas we are, but also with countries where we don't have formal relationships established. In each of those global hubs, we've come to enjoy unprecedented access for a place of our size to key decision makers at the most senior levels across government, business and civic society. And that's reflected in the type of access we tend to enjoy when our ministers come across, and a significant increase in recent years too in the number of inward visits here to Belfast from overseas delegations. And by way of example, over the past 12 months, we've hosted over 75 international visits with almost 540 delegates. That's included ambassadors and senior business and government representatives from the world's largest economies. That's almost double our pre-COVID record. And what's particularly interesting is a very strong correlation you see there between where we have a presence and where those visits are originating from. So the level of access and interest we've come to enjoy was not secured overnight. It's been patiently and diligently built over many years, working very closely with our diaspora, stakeholders and partners, whilst tailoring our engagement to the specific circumstances and opportunities of countries and regions we are. And alongside this government-to-government interaction, Invest NI's international team lead on business-to-business engagement, including building those business relationships between Northern Ireland and both established and emerging global markets. And it's important to recognise these aren't mutually exclusive roles. Each creates the conditions of success for the other. So raising our profile, building awareness, confidence and trust, telling our story and showcasing what they have to offer are key to our ability, I think, to secure investment, increase visitors, students, etc., coming here to Northern Ireland, and even market access. Moreover, success in those areas create the conditions which enhance our credibility in seeking to build new relations and expand our reach. And that reflects how the overseas offices and networks work very, very closely together and cooperating. Looking forward, we're operating in a constrained fiscal environment, but also in a much more competitive, turbulent and challenging space internationally, as others vie for access, influence and investment. To respond to that, we are looking at how we build on our success, but equally how we drive a more targeted and joined up approach across government. And that's about ensuring that all of our engagement and activity is very much targeted against core and READ priorities, is reinforcing our messages, and it's about maximising the impact and amplifying our voice in those areas. And ministers have highlighted how that's a key ambition for the draft international relations strategy. Similarly, we're also looking at how we work with our diaspora and the UK and Ireland overseas networks to amplify our voice and impact. I think you'd be grateful I'd be stopped at that point, and if you're happy enough, Chair, I'll pass over to each of the directors for some short remarks, starting with Kerry and Aidan on screen and then returning to Richard here in the room.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy with that. Go ahead, please. Aidan, do you want to start?
I will bow to Kerry first.
Okay, Kerry, go ahead. Go ahead, Kerry. Thanks.
Apologies. Hello, everyone from sunny Beijing. I say sunny, it's quite late here and very dark, but warm nonetheless. I just want to first say thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the work of the Bureau at the Executive Committee today. I've been out in Beijing since the end of August last year, and my role here is all about strategically promoting Northern Ireland's interests. I do this through building high-level relationships, influencing policy, and facilitating economic, educational, and cultural cooperation. We're a very small team, as you will have seen from your notes out here in China, but I do think that we use collaboration to very great effect to amplify our efforts. through targeted diplomacy, coordinated efforts across departments and with our stakeholders, we ensure that the resources allocated to the Bureau generate measurable returns in terms of increased market access, enhancing our profile out here in China, and also creating mutually beneficial collaborations. We very much prioritise our partnerships and activities in sectors where Northern Ireland already has innovative technology capability, capacity, and where there is corresponding market opportunity out here in China. So look forward to saying so much more about the Bureau during this session. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Go ahead, please, Aidan.
Hi, I'm delighted to be back in front of you again, and I'm genuinely grateful for the opportunity to tell you about the meaningful and tangible work that my team in Brussels does to raise the profile of Northern Ireland and to make sure that the issues, concerns, innovation and opportunities that we have are understood. Building on what Tom said, just because we're based in Brussels doesn't mean we work in a silo. We work closely with our colleagues in international relations in Belfast, and we have a strong, very strong, mutually supportive relationship with our colleagues in Beijing on Washington, which allows our ministers to take a global perspective on issues. So, for example, most recently on tariffs. We also provide platforms for and support building networks for business, academia, justice community, arts, agri-food sector, and we use the connections that we have at home through bodies such as Invest, NI, the Arts Council and Food NI to make sure that we're able to tell that positive story. We in Brussels, of course, have a slightly different remit than the other two bureaux in the fact that we support departments by providing them with information on EU laws that have an impact on Northern Ireland. That includes upstream monitoring, facilitating engagement such as the annual Commission Work Programme seminar, tracking and monitoring EU proposals as they go through that long legislative process. And the importance of that work is going to be even more pronounced given the volume of new amending and replacement law we're likely to see now that we have a new 5-year EU work programme. But as well as the formal channels, we use our contacts outside of the formal structures to gather information so that policy leads have an early understanding and can provide timely advice to ministers. That's paid dividends in areas as diverse as mercury, dental amalgam and tariff rate quotas. But most of all, we are the face of Northern Ireland in Europe. We tell the positive narrative of Northern Ireland being a great place to live, great place to work and invest, but also an innovative, collaborative partner who has thought leadership as well. So last year we carried those messages to over 1,600 people directly through our events and many, many thousands more through our collective engagement as a team. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Okay, thank you. We'd like to hear from you now, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I think my colleagues have probably covered a lot of it, so I know time is tight and you'll have plenty of questions. My name is Richard Kushney. I've been the Director, similar time frame to Kerry, since September. The Bureau exists to promote and help Northern Ireland in the US and Canada. Help is a key word for us. So we assist everybody from Northern Ireland who's looking to achieve something in the US and Canada, and we help US contacts and stakeholders connect with the people they want to connect with here, all to achieve the outcomes that we want to see. So that's really what we do, similar to what my colleagues, we work closely together to achieve those aims. I'm very pleased to be here. What we do overseas is so important, and it's so important to get this kind of scrutiny and challenge and support as well from the committee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just a question for you from this for the start there, Tom. So you talked about the draft international relations strategy. So the last one was 2014. Mm-hmm. Where is our up-to-date one?
Well, I think the Deputy First Minister was it 12th of May in Orals highlighted the fact we are at a very advanced stage now with the strategy. There was a lot of preparatory work was undertaken in the early stages, reviewing the previous strategy, how things had changed, because the global environment has changed fundamentally with COVID, EU exit as well, things that weren't anticipated in 2014. We've seen further changes since then in the last number of months, which have also had an impact. which are likely to have an impact, for example, on what does this mean for trade, for relations. So those are being looked at. Ministers are being clear, I think, setting out the kind of direction the strategy is going to take, but it is an advanced stage of development, and there's been a lot of work undertaken with departments and stakeholders to inform that.
So when you say very advanced, like, are we going to see it within this mandate?
That's, to be honest, Chair, I mean, it's a matter for ministers here now in terms of the process for taking that forward. But ministers have been clear their intention is to bring it to the committee once we have executive endorsement and agreement that the strategy will be brought to the committee.
Okay, so Kerry, you came before us when you just started your job and you held your hands up that communication up till that point hadn't been great, and I take Tom's point there around it takes time to build relationships, etc. So the Bureau has been operating there for 10.5 years, and I calculate that about £2.5 million has been spent during that time keeping the office open. The last press statement was 2018. The last tweet was December 21, and that was a retweet around the COVID vaccine. My colleague Connie Egan said, we need to hear more about what you're doing. We haven't had a ministerial statement, we haven't had a press statement, we haven't even had a tweet since you came before us before. Could you please provide us with some understanding of what you're doing? I don't want any civil service speak. I want to hear tangible projects that are benefiting the people here in Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for your question, Chair. And just to say, maybe just to set the scene a little bit on communications, you're absolutely right. And I've been out in post since the end of August and actually started in post in September. And a lot of the work that I've been doing during that time is actually to get us to the point where we have a good utility in our communications channels for the start of the 25-26 year. So I've got a whole system of reporting and also communications that we need to push out. That there was some challenges when I arrived with regards to technicalities of sharing information when you're in China on platforms that are accessible in the UK. You'll be familiar with the firewall in China. So there's some challenges there that we've found our workaround, and we're actually launching our new website in the coming weeks. So we're actually currently getting that translated into Chinese, and we'll be driving a lot of traffic to that for both our UK, European and Chinese audience. So it's just taken a while to build it, but this is the year. But in terms of actual activity, which is your question, so during the time that I've been here, we've been, I suppose I've been engaging an awful lot in terms of building back up our network out here in China. There was about maybe 2 years because of COVID that we didn't have a Northern Ireland representative out in post. So I've been working out here with Ulster University, with the Confucius Institute, very practically on things like poster competitions between our school children in China and the UK, or sorry, UK and Northern Ireland, in order to develop improved cultural understanding under the theme of Year of the Snake. I've been speaking at economic conferences in Shenyang and Liaoning, very specifically around Queen's Medical University, which has a 10-year relationship in Shenyang, around our sister city relationship up in Liaoning province. I've been in Shanghai talking to high value tour operators around the opportunities and in terms of bringing high value tourists from China into Northern Ireland in association with Tourism Ireland, and also Visit Britain. It's a joint event. So that's just a very practical thing, because we know that we've got about 80,000 visitors from China each year that come to Northern Ireland, and from the latest figures, we know that they stay longer. We know that they spend more money than both European and US visitors when they come. So I actually have another event with Tourism Ireland in the morning, again, to push that point, because it actually brings practical financial benefit to us in NI. I've been working with the Centre for Language Education Cooperation, which funds our Confucius Institute. They've just announced a 10-year funding programme for Northern Ireland to the value of, I think, 37 million over the 10 years. I have had a fantastic St. Patrick's event in the Bureau offices, reaching out to not just our partners across the government here, both in the UK and the Irish embassies, but also our diaspora from Northern Ireland in China. So we had 140 visitors come to our office to work out how they can engage with us, but also get to know each other and make those business and education connections. So that was really useful for us. I've also been engaging with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, who have funded some work with Arts Council Northern Ireland to bring art groups from Northern Ireland out to China so that they can access a bigger market. And just on Monday, I was at one of those artists who had travelled over to the Beijing Conservatory, and that was the Hard Rain Ensemble, to hear their performance to the Beijing Modern Music Festival. And on a very practical level then, not just in the events and speaking at things, I've been working really closely with our partners across government in the Foreign Office, in the Department for Business and Trade, with UKRI, British Council, to work out their policy, engagement and direction for the years ahead, to see where Northern Ireland fits within that context, and to ensure that, for example, on the health agenda, that a policy agenda between UK and China, that just to give a practical example, that the very specific regulatory environment in Northern Ireland in relation to being able to regulate for both environments on an all-island basis, but also into the EU, that's taken into account in the way that the dialogue on health and medical devices is developed. Hydrogen is another area that I'm working on, again, to ensure that Northern Ireland hydrogen capacity, capability and parameters are taken into account in the development of Foreign Office and Department for Business and Trade policy and regulation development. So it's a whole host of things. I'm sorry that's quite a lot to have thrown. Those are the things that I've been working on last year. I'm really happy to touch on the fantastic plans that we have for 25-26, but I don't want to hog up too much time. If you're happy for me to do so, just give me a nod.
It probably would have been useful if you had have sent them in advance of the meeting, because then we could have looked at those and then asked you questions on them. So we'll maybe come back to you on that. I want to pick up on the point that you made there, Kerry, that the Bureau wasn't operating for 2 years during the pandemic. So I have the figures in front of me that were supplied by the Executive Office. There was 2021. £375,000. The following year, £397,000, and the following year is £376,000. So that will be over the period that Kerry's talking about. What was that money spent on?
Sorry,
I think Tom's going to speak to it. Kerry, go ahead, please, Tom.
I'll pick up the start of that and then pass to Kerry. The essential thing is we were working time there with zero COVID policy in China. And that was creating considerable difficulties for the director who was there at the time. So there were no in-person meetings. When that individual came back to Northern Ireland, they were there in quarantine for, I think it was 2 to 4 weeks every time they went back. And this wasn't quarantine within your home, this was hotel-based quarantine. Our understanding at that point then was a zero COVID. The Chinese government said a zero COVID was likely to be in place up to 2025, I think it was. So we agreed that the Bureau, the director, could come back to Belfast and work from Belfast, because all meetings were online in China at that point anyway, and there was no internal travel. We had a lease in the office, of course, which had to be maintained, and then we had 2 locally recruited staff who also had to maintain through that period. So we still had the costs, we just did not have a Bureau in place up and running because of the implications of zero COVID.
Kerry, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just around. So yes, I think the point that I was making, Chair, is that there was no director in situ in Beijing for a period of time, which is why so many relationships had to be developed. There are very specific rules across all embassies in China about how our locally employed staff, so our Chinese nationals, can be utilised through embassy work. So they technically aren't allowed to represent another nation in their activities. So it meant that there was absolutely a dampening of some of those relationships, and an ongoing cost, as you say, in terms of rent, in terms of the One HMG platform costs, which are the arrangements we have with the Foreign Office to actually enable the Bureau to operate through the embassy system. So there was unavoidable costs associated with that. But also our China-based staff did undertake a number of projects during that time that were reaching out to our through the Confucius Institute, because it was a CLEC funded project. They still sponsored some events that were taking place online. They organised a few online events to specific audiences. So it wasn't there was no activity. It's just that there wasn't a Northern Ireland representative out in post. So it really had a dampening effect on, the general engagement. And in fact, post-COVID, a lot of the people who have that we work with are relatively new to China, because there was a lot of people from out with China that went home during that quarantine period, and new people have came into post.
Okay, just the last one on this, Carrie. I was listening intently in terms of what you have been working on, and it seemed that there was a project there and you have got involved in it. There was an event and you attended it. What are you doing? What is your bureau actually doing that isn't about piggybacking on the work of what others are doing?
Okay, so thank you, Chair, and that's a brilliant question, and it does give me a good opportunity to talk about the specific things that we're doing. So let's take education as an example. So I mentioned in my opening remarks that we're looking to improve market access, which technically will fall through the work of Foreign Office, DBT, Department for Business and Trade. So my role is to make sure that Northern Ireland is duly represented and acknowledged within those. Hydrogen being a great example, where our parameters around hydrogen and how it's employed through the likes of Wrightbus in Northern Ireland are distinct and different from the types of hydrogen being developed and employed elsewhere in the UK. So ensuring that those types of things are acknowledged in the policy development is critical for our long-term market access. That's just one aspect. If we look at education, one of the very specific projects that I'm working on is around accreditation of Northern Ireland's regional colleges. So there's a huge opportunity for our regional colleges to expand vocational training into China, but currently they are challenged by the accreditation process. So I specifically am working with the Ministry of Education, the consulates in both Belfast and in London for China, and also colleagues here who have experience of going through it for regional colleges elsewhere or private companies elsewhere, to make sure that our colleges in Northern Ireland, which currently don't have accreditation, receive it in order to open up that market. And also in terms of, I mentioned the importance of arts and culture and actually raising the profile of Northern Ireland. We're hosting for the very first time a culture week in Beijing. It's going to be our first, but I hope it's the first of many of success, Seamus Heaney Night, where we actually bring Northern Ireland's literary culture to Beijing for the first time. I'm hoping that'll be very popular. We're also going to have an arts exhibition in collaboration with Arts Council Northern Ireland and with the Beijing Academy of Arts, showcasing our around. I'm hoping again this will be an annual thing, but this year we're using the theme of peace and reconciliation. So it's our inaugural arts exhibition, but it's one that has already had a lot of interest. On local authority engagement, so our local authorities are really keen to look at both the export opportunities, but also the inward investment opportunities for their local authority areas. I've spoken to many of the chief executives of local authorities in Northern Ireland on this. One of the mechanisms through which we do that is sister city relationships. We have 4 formal sister city relationships in various stages of don't really work. We haven't done very much with them, and it's a warm relationship, but there's no tangible benefits. So one of the things that I'm looking at, or not looking at, but specifically working on at the moment, is getting Foreign Office funded through the Capability Fund in London to bring some of our local authority senior staff out to Beijing to workshop with them some of the very specific ways that they can pull tangible results out of those sister city relationships in line with individual local authorities' aims for outward engagement with China. So hopefully that'll set a pathway and almost like a baseline for what we can use with other local authorities that want to do it. So that's just one example of that.
Sorry, Carrie.
one of-
I'm conscious if you can send us
Sorry.
your plan. I think that
Yeah.
we can return to this. in the future.
It's actually sitting. I would have sent it to you already, Chair, but it's actually sitting. I've sent it off to get approved. So at the minute, it's just a draft plan, and I'm hoping that it'll be with you. So it could easily be with you in a few weeks.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
But yes, happens, Chair.
thank you. Deputy Chair, please, thanks.
Hey, and everybody, thanks very much. And feel free, whoever wants to answer some of these questions. Maybe just going back to the point that Kerry was making about, and I do appreciate the difficulties that you will have with social media and with websites from the China end of your activity. But that doesn't exist here in Northern Ireland. So why is the Executive Office's website page about China so out of date? 2017? Why aren't you doing it at this end? Because actually the people that are interested in this work are the people in the businesses in Northern Ireland. Likewise, why isn't Kerry, through her whatever communication channel she has with you, why was the last tweet in 2021? I would ask the same also of the Washington office. Why was your last tweet in October 2024? And Brussels, you're up to date. You were in April. China has 35 followers on X. Brussels is 931. Washington's actually 1.5 thousand. It just seems to me that your social media and your website is totally and utterly failing you. And it's as much a problem of the people at the far end as it is here in Belfast, because if they can't do it, you can certainly do it. This is your website, this is your web page about China, and it tells us absolutely zilch. Kerry made reference to all the organisations that she's been working with, and that's been very helpful. But Kerry, you missed one out. You have 3 colleagues from Invest Northern Ireland based in China. When did you last meet with them? It just beggars belief that Invest Northern Ireland was not mentioned in any of this information that we've received. It just is very strange that there seems to be a very limited level of, and no reference, and maybe it is the role of Invest Northern Ireland to liaise with what this is all about. This is about, ultimately, I appreciate the cultural and educational links, but this is about business. This is about attracting business into Northern Ireland or selling our business out of Northern Ireland into those places. But that is not your role, that's the role of Invest Northern Ireland. So what level of cooperation is there between each of the 3 of you and Invest Northern Ireland in delivering these things? And specifically, Kerry, one other question for you. I don't believe, maybe it applies a bit in terms of the United States of America, but certainly the elephant in the room when it comes to China is human rights. Mm-hmm. What specific responsibility do you have to raise the issue of human rights with every section of the Chinese government that you meet? And we have serious concerns back here at home with regards to any relationship with the Confucius Institute as well. Those are areas of concern. And we need to hear that from you, and we need to hear that you're challenging these things on behalf of Northern Ireland. My final area of comment is with regards to the wider relationship beyond Invest Northern Ireland. I find equally surprisingly that both Scotland and Wales are represented in each of your jurisdictions as well. But again, in China, they don't have standalone offices. They're based in the British Embassy. Why can't you just simply be based there and cost us a lot less money?
So if I could start, if you don't
Ready,
mind,
Aidan?
on If I could start on the Invest NI, firstly, it was in the brief that they sent you our work on Invest NI. To answer your question, when was the last time that I spoke to someone from Invest NI? It was about 3 hours ago. And we do have some really tangible outputs as far as what we do with Invest NI. In fact, I recently got sent a lovely email saying that they were thankful of the collaboration, thankful that we worked with them on platforms, very thankful for sharing of contacts, and also the commercial leads that we've been able to provide, which is not our job to take forward. It's our job to make those contacts and pass them on. Similarly with departments contacts, and they've been able to put it through their new business processes in Belfast and pursue market contacts for them. So I would say that there's a strong, and that this is replicated with what the guys in Washington and Beijing do. It's a very, very strong focus for us, and you'll know from my background and actually Kerry's background as well, that the economic side of things is something that we're very at home with, and something that we push. So I would give a slight pushback on that to say that there's a lot of work going on, not only with Invest NI, but in the wider economic space for Northern Ireland.
I think we need to hear that, and I don't want to make fish of one and fowl of the other, but the reality is the closer you get to home, the more of these things you do actually see happening. So I think in the Brussels context, in a sense, you get a better mark than the other two do, but it is a serious area of concern.
But I don't think that it's you can't look at us as individual. We are not only a mutual support society for everybody living abroad and trying to deal with the very strange lives that we have out at events every night, long hours, being across wide briefs for lots of departments and other stakeholders. But we actually work together on everything from this committee appearance right through to the economic stuff, and we would share good messages, good examples, and we'd work together on that. So I'll let the other two speak for themselves, but just to say, I don't think you can look at any of the bureau in its individuality. It's something that's a team effort along with our colleagues in Belfast.
Okay, so Richard, Kerry, and then Tom, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Vice Chair, we, to echo Aidan's comments, we work exceptionally closely with Invest NI. We couldn't do the work without them. I like to think they couldn't do the work that they do without us as well. We work together to build a platform for Northern Ireland, and Andrea Hockian does an amazing job in North America. Michael Barton leads Canada. We deal with them daily on these things. We co-host a breakfast with them and with Tourism Ireland, and this year with Queen's University. So that partnership model is at the heart of what we do. And I think the sort of synergy between that is they lead on the economic stuff, but we bring the political, the connections to the executive here, which put those together. It's a very powerful message. On the website and the social media, I accept the charge. We've just recruited today. Somebody's going to lead on that for us. So there's been a recruitment process going on. It's the one area I didn't touch. Like Kerry, like Aidan, we get drawn into all sorts of different things. The social media website was one that I didn't want to kind of mess with and just drop into and not develop a consistent message. So I wanted to make sure until we had the right resources to deliver it in the right way, and we've now got that person.
But the reality is it's a back office responsibility. It's not necessarily your front office responsibility.
But I take responsibility. We do have a front office responsibility as well to have a really exciting website and a good social media presence across the platforms that is consistent with the messaging here, but also taps into the interest in US and Canada, and we need to get that right. So I'd say watch this space.
Harry, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for those questions, Deputy Chair. Just taking them very quickly on the social media and web presence piece. As I mentioned, I've come in and looked to develop a lot of those programs for our communications plan for 25-26. Absolutely, it wasn't fit for purpose, and in part, when you look at things like Twitter and the low engagement with that, it's because it hasn't been utilised, and again, in part because the restrictions. So you need a VPN in China, which you can't download in China in order to access the likes of Twitter. So
Just to,
as a
interrupt you,
medium,
Kerry, just to interrupt you, Kerry, you clearly didn't understand the direction I was coming from in respect to that. I recognise that you have those difficulties. My criticism is of the Executive Office and why they're not doing it in the Belfast-facing side of all of this.
Go ahead, Tom.
and
Sorry.
I would, sorry, Chair, just possibly say that some of those messages will be coming out through more central platforms rather than the set up China bureau piece, which absolutely has not been utilised. But just in the interest of time, I'll touch on Invest NI. So we share information with Invest NI regularly. Our roles are different. They do the business to business side of things, so I share information that might be appropriate. They do the same with me. I have a colleague in Invest NI sitting in this, just the next building to me, and just this weekend on Friday I'm traveling to Shanghai to catch up with Richard, who's the director of Invest NI in China. So yes, if we went through all of the engagements we had, and I apologise that we didn't go into that in more detail, but just conscious there was so much to cover, I apologise that got overlooked. You mentioned the really important, very, very important human rights issue, and I just do want to touch on that if I may. Human rights is an area that challenges all areas of government that engage with China. The role that we take is follows really the guidance from the Foreign Office, which is one of economic realism, and they've set out very clearly guidance on human rights challenges in engaging with China. So the way that they've set it out is their whole policy in engagement with China is from the 3 C's. So cooperate and collaborate with China in areas where it makes sense for us to do so, whether that's in research at an education level or on big global challenges like climate change, net zero. Of course, we need to cooperate with China. We also want to compete with them. That's the 2nd C, compete in areas where we have market advantage. Perhaps we have a new innovation or technology in agri-tech, in software, in medical devices that we would want to export into the China market and help in our Programme for Government Growth agenda. But thirdly, and equally important, the challenge function. So in each of our opportunities to engage with the Chinese government, there is the opportunity to challenge them on human rights, and that can be done in a very diplomatic way. We can say one of and this is how certainly we've been advised how to do it by the ambassador out in China, is to say it's challenging for us to engage with China because of its human rights record, and it makes engagement with you difficult, and it gives us the opportunity to say that, and we're encouraged to do so. Often when I've been in meetings with ministers, just to be very, very specific, when I've been in meetings with ministers, there's a more senior person in the room with me, perhaps representing the Foreign Office or the ambassador herself or deputy head of mission, and they're the ones to say that. So it does get raised all of the time. So absolutely, the 3 C's are talked about in almost every Chinese official engagement. And then you mentioned as well, sorry, why we're not based in the embassy, probably for lots of reasons. So our space in the embassy is really confined. The embassy has actually been trying to create a new embassy space for about 10 years, probably about the length of time that we've had an external office. And lots of the other partners across government have chosen to have an external office. So UKRI, the British Council, they have external offices. The Scottish office, which you mentioned very specifically, they actually have a larger platform cost, or 1HMG cost, than we do. And a larger budget for events and activities that allows them to hire space outside of the embassy, whereas we've determined through our value for money exercises that actually having an external space where we can hold those events works out cheaper for us, and we're able to do more activity for less money. So it was a conscious decision to have an external office rather than being inside the embassy and having external space, because there isn't the space for events in the current embassy. although that may change in the future as it redevelops the site.
Okay, thank you,
All be
Kerry.
well.
Tom,
Sorry.
did you want to add to
That's
that?
quite extensive.
Yeah, I mean, just pick up on Kerry's last point about the benefits too that having that external space has. I mean, you'll seen quite recently there's a handover of the moon samples to the UK scientists from China. That took place in our office. And that was the reception, the public announcement. And that gave us an opportunity as a kind of quid pro quo for that, is that event focused very much at the outset on allowing us to promote Northern Ireland as an uninvited place in our history in that regard too. So, I mean, I'll focus on two main issues. Stuart, in terms of the social media, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is no defence there. It's something we have been looking at. Now, it is in the context of the new strategy, but the new strategy is we do not have to wait for agreement on the new strategy to start pushing some of this forward. And both what Kerry have been doing in China and what Richard has now been doing in the United States will tie in with ourselves here and addressing that. But I'm not justifying the fact, as you said, the last tweet was 2021. Okay. The second thing is an Invest NI. The teams work incredibly closely, both in the overseas offices, and I think it comes back to some of the comms pieces, and it is an issue we're looking at as well, is how do we improve the comms from the overseas offices using the Brussels Bulletin. I think is a good example of some of the things that happened there, which could probably highlight that. But also here in Belfast as well, we work very, very closely. Invest and I have been heavily engaged in that review of the international relations strategy, also looking at our priorities, what we're trying to achieve. I've had a few discussions previously with counterparts in Invest NI, which have looked at the need to make sure that when we do have an international relations strategy, which we're envisaging as a kind of framework, that Invest NI's international plans and ours are fully aligned, and we see that reflected then in the programmes of each of the overseas offices. But we do work very, very closely together, and it's unfortunate if that message hasn't come across. It's certainly something we'll pick up in looking at the communications going forward.
Okay, thank you. Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your attendance today, and particularly Kerry for staying up late in your time zone. As a general comment, I mean, I very much recognise the value of diplomacy and building relations and the role of government in helping to smooth the path for business cooperation, academic cooperation, political cooperation, just building those relationships and making that commitment over a long time scale. Equally, all of us are accountable to the public person, to the public, for the spending of money. So people rightly want to know, is there output from that diplomacy and for that cooperation? And that's what we're exploring. But thank you for the reports that we did receive in advance. I'll start with Aidan. In terms of Brussels, obviously in the political context, very much my view is that Northern Ireland took the hit for an open border on the island of Ireland between the UK and the EU, and it's been a long process, ongoing process, undoing the damage of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'm sure that is an area of work that you highlight, the need to respect Northern Ireland's place within the UK and undo the burdensome and unnecessary restrictions put on trade from Northern Ireland, particularly with the rest of the UK. Is that an issue that you're highlighting through the Bureau with EU officials? And we note that some progress has been made, and we'll judge the outcomes of the deal this week. But is that an aspect of your work that is receiving priority?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Kingston. It's good to see you, Brian. Yes, the Windsor Framework. Obviously, I can't make comment on political matters, but as far as our work concerned, the Windsor Framework is our priority, and those EU-UK relations in respect to Northern Ireland are something that underpins the vast majority of what we do. Now, you mentioned there with the Commission, it's not just the Commission that we work with. It is the Parliament, it is Member States, it is the UK mission, it is the the Irish Permanent Representation. It is everything right through to think tanks. And the reason we do that is to make sure that people understand the concerns of Northern Ireland, the opportunities that we have, and as I said earlier, get an actual flavour of what we do. I think there's a wider point here about, and you said it yourself as far as soft diplomacy is concerned. Whenever I started out in public affairs many years ago, a bit of advice that I was given was you get more done with a cup of coffee and a smile than you do with a 30-page paper. And there's some conversations that we can only have here. Some of the information that we've been able to get on tariffs, the EU-UK reset, on a lot of issues, and it's the same with Washington and China. You can only do those based on personal relationships built on trust. Now, actually on the framework itself, we don't have a seat around the table anymore. We're not part of the Parliament, we're not part of the Council, and that means that we have to work slightly harder and in different ways to engage. So we support departments with information on EU laws that have an impact on Northern Ireland. That includes upstream monitoring, facilitating engagement with things like the annual Commission Work Programme seminar, tracking and monitoring EU proposals as they go through the legislative process, highlighting where impacts will be. And actually the importance of this work, as I said in my introductory remarks, is even more important now that we're into a five-year Commission Work Programme. And there's already tangible benefits. Over this past couple of years, I'll name a couple of high-profile ones. The mercury regulations on dental amalgam. We worked with the Department of Health, we worked with UK Mission, we worked with the Commission, we worked with member states, and we were able to gain that derogation up until 2034. We also worked on things that are close and important to business, like tariff rate quotas, especially on things like steel and aluminium. We also support departments to have the information that they need, not only to engage properly and to be part of the formal Windsor Framework structures, such as the Joint Consultative Working Group, but also give them the tools that they need to go in front of not only their own commissions, but committees, but the Democratic Scrutiny Committee. And a lot of this information isn't the publicly available stuff. A lot of this information is what our guys pick up. And honestly, they're superb at networking to make the best of our resources to ensure that we use soft power, door opening opportunities, and informal relationships to gain information that quite simply wouldn't be possible. So for us, the Windsor Framework is our biggest priority. The EU, UK, and Northern Ireland relationship is our biggest priority, and it's something that we work on day and daily.
Okay, look, I
I
appreciate.
think Tom wanted to add to
go
that.
ahead.
do you?
Yes, it's just very briefly, Brian. I mean, I think the critical point is we know there's no agreed position on the Windsor Framework, but there is clear agreement there that we want the best possible outcome for Northern Ireland at all levels. So a key point of what Aidan on the wider network does is identify and understand what actually are the practical issues in Northern Ireland. How do we make sure those are fed in to the system to ensure that we get the kind of positive outcomes he talked about, for example, in dental amalgam. So it's very much a kind of an objective issues driven approach here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I just think it's important that we have people who are speaking up for Northern Ireland, which is a small player on the Europe-wide scale. And I mean, we rightly have a grievance that we were expected to take all the pain of arrangements for an open border, and we need people highlighting that we remain part of the UK, and we must have full access to our internal market, and as unhindered as possible. I want to move on to Washington DC, and I declare an interest, having visited there when I was Lord Mayor Belfast during the late Norman Houston's time there and the great work he did. And I don't think we don't need to make the case for our connections with US and Canada, our deep shared history there, and the many US companies in particular, and Canadian, I note as well, based here. So I just want to ask, in terms of recent times,
and obviously the tariffs that were introduced and then reduced in some categories. What are you able to report to us on current investment plans, how they're being impacted by this presidency, and do you feel that pipeline of investment, has there been an impact on it?
Yes. So we've got a new administration. There's always change, and there's been a lot of change with this one. So you have to respond to that. The actual investment pipeline is for Invest NI because they engage on those business to business links. In terms of the wider profile, what we do reflects a phrase you used a few moments ago about speaking up for Northern Ireland at every opportunity. So what we do is make sure that the noise levels are high about what Northern Ireland offers in terms of cybersecurity, life sciences, fintech. We take every opportunity we can to do that. But we also speak up for those other opportunities, such as the need for a special envoy, the impact of tariffs. We had both ministers in North Carolina, which is a great opportunity in March, but we also had the Deputy First Minister in DC, and she spoke to the President about these things and various other high-level stakeholders and new US ambassadors to the UK and Ireland as well. So every opportunity is taken to promote that opportunity in Northern Ireland, and the tourism and the universities and everything else that goes with it. The impact, we'll need to wait and see what exactly the impact of all these changes are going to be. But my mission in all that is to make sure that whatever changes around us, everybody understands the excellence that we offer in Northern Ireland and the breadth of opportunity in the cultural sphere, in the arts, in the business universities. And of course, as was mentioned earlier, a lot of those institutions do their own work as well. The universities do great work. And sometimes it is a matter of us amplifying those. The councils do great work as well. There was a great visit to Nashville in February led by Belfast City Council, and that brought together Queen's University, ourselves, Belfast City Council, which makes a very impactful result altogether with a huge economic driver in terms of Nashville's growth. And Belfast City Council are coming out again. You're glad to hear, to New York, and we're working with them on really bringing back to your question. The new opportunities used to always be about, not just about, but about investment into Northern Ireland, and increasing there's opportunities for Northern Irish businesses to grow into the US. That fits very neatly with the new administration's message around wanting to grow business opportunities in the US, but also helps growth here. So that's the sorts of things we work to support, and we're working with the Belfast Chamber on doing that in New York as well.
And just a comment before, just a comment, but you're right about the university links. I mean, they're just astonishing, the number. I think it's Vanderbilt in Nashville, and then Belfast obviously has Boston and Nashville as sister cities, in the US.
Whenever I mention the Belfast mayor, I always feel like there are, of course, other mayors, and the Derry mayor was in recently as well, representing Derry and Strabane, but receiving an honorary doctorate from Howard University in DC. So that was a great opportunity to build a relationship with them, which again, I don't think we've done as much with them in the past.
You want to add to that, Tom, please?
Yeah, it's very brief. It's coming back in the tariffs issue itself. I think what's been quite useful is we've had a very coordinated approach across the three bureau, looking at exactly what is going on in each of the areas and the possible, both in terms of the tariff and the likely responses to those, the impacts that could potentially have itself. And that's allowed us as well then to feed into our engagement with UKG, because obviously the UK government has been negotiating with Washington as well. So we make sure that we have sufficient information that we're feeding that into those negotiations and the potential implications for Northern Ireland taken on board. So it's a very complex, dynamic space between the three bureau on this.
Okay, and just also just a question to Kerry then, and declaring interest, I also had the honour to visit Shenyang as our sister city in Liaoning province, and I'm not sure is Liaoning still as a province linked to Northern Ireland. I know there was a special relationship there as well. It still is very good, and I mean, on that visit I was accompanied by Queen's University, Ulster University, Belfast Metropolitan College, just highlighting the very strong academic links and the number of students coming from China to Northern Ireland. And you've mentioned already about the Confucius Institute here, in the consulate here. So the two questions I want to ask are, I have heard that there's been some reduction in student numbers coming to Northern Ireland from China. So I don't know if you have any measure on that. And also to ask about the work of promoting and teaching the English language, and I know the Confucius Institute's teaching Chinese here, but there's a great demand for learning the English language in China. I think possibly, is it the British Institute is involved in that? So just is there activity there, and which is a great selling point for us. And even when I was there, the Republic of Ireland officials were promoting the Republic of Ireland as the after Brexit, the only Indigenous English-speaking country in the EU. You know, they were using that as a selling point, knowing that it's the international language of communication.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingston. Yes, I spent a lot of time, because it's actually only a couple of hours by bullet train up to Shenyang, and I'm traveling there just next month to speak at their second International Economic Conference and Sister City event, having attended the first one not long after I first arrived. But yet the question around student numbers for visitors from China is a really complex one, and I know I don't have the exact figures, but there's a few things going on at the moment that we do regularly discuss. So one is around sort of like the student numbers that are available to us within Northern Ireland. Actually, one of the ways in which we can grow our services exports is by growing the number of Chinese students who attain a Northern Irish accredited degree in China. And so that's an area that our universities are really focusing on. So that's a big area of growth. Queen's were out here not long ago setting up what I hope to be a new relationship with another university that we put them in or link them in with. So there's a lot happening in terms of shifting, or in terms of whether Chinese students wish to go abroad or wish to receive a foreign education in situ in China. But then there's the complex matter of geopolitical storms that are going on around us at the moment. So you'll appreciate that there's been a bit of a change in sentiment in terms of Chinese students wishing to attain a US degree. I think that's something that's widely known that's happening. And so one of the areas that we've been discussing in our educational outreach communication discussions within the UK Embassy is the potential for this to grow interest in UK universities as a universities of choice in lieu of attending US universities. We've already seen sort of like the potential reduction in those numbers, and they will need to go somewhere because there is a contingent of Chinese students who do want to have that foreign education university experience. So there's a lot of things shifting at the moment, and unfortunately, no, I do not have current numbers, but it is something that I would dearly love to have numbers on. The best that we'll be able to achieve is like a sentiment survey on that, which is something that will be included in some research work that I'm looking to do this year. But yes, really good point about teaching English language within China. I unfortunately need to learn Chinese in China in order to improve my language skills here. But it's the British Council who is actually the accreditation body here, and they've got a really big team. Again, like ourselves, that they're situated outside of the embassy, but work really closely with the embassy. I was actually at an event earlier this week with the British Council, and we're talking about doing a number of joint activities. So while we don't have a specific role in teaching English as a foreign language out here, we do engage with the British Council, who spend actually probably the majority of their staff out here working at that accredited English language space. But there's an awful lot going on at the British Council, aside from that we work with them on mainly in the cultural space at present. But when I look at our regional colleges and the vocational work that they might do out here, it's unlikely to be in that English language space because it is fairly sewn up and well recognised within the British Council space. And of course, we have Jonathan at the British Council based in Belfast that we link in with in terms of the role that British Council in Northern Ireland plays. But and again, they work very closely with their counterparts in Beijing. So yes, definitely something that's going on, something that we're linked in with, but not actively engaged in delivering.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Harry, please. Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of the Bureau, how do people feed into you? Like, where do you get your information from?
For us in DC, in terms of information from here, or when we're engaging in the US?
Yeah, no, in like general. You know,
General.
Just, yeah.
Well, as Brian mentioned Norman Houston a few minutes ago, so I just want to pay tribute to the work that Norman did in building up the Bureau and all those relationships over a long period of time. So it's a mixture of two things. There's the relationships we have here, so with Queen's University, also all the various stakeholders, Invest in Tourism Ireland. The relationships in the US are a mixture of political, economic, think tanks, universities, members of Congress. So we spend our time building those relationships with those contacts so that we can both deploy or make the points that matter about Northern Ireland. I mentioned special envoy or the impact of tariffs, but also then to use those contacts to deliver on an important part of our work, which is visits. So we build up those relationships, and then when we have got visitors coming out, we can use them for ministers or senior officials to meet with them. So we get information from a wide range of being out there, building those networks, engaging across political, economic, social, university, and building up that network. And we try to do that as much as possible outside DC as well. So across the States and Canada as well. Is that the sort of thing you're...
I think Tom wanted that, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing to add that, Harry, is there are structures here which engage. So we have a cross-departmental group which provides us an opportunity to work with departments to explore a wide range of issues. Each of the directors is part of that. We have a wider kind of senior officials group, we call it, which also brings in departments. We have an external group which brings in local government as well and some other key stakeholders, and there's very close working relationship, in particular with the university. So it's one of the great things about Northern Ireland you often hear is we're quite a small space, which means it's very, very easy to connect across organisations, and we use that in a way that allows us to get that more comprehensive and sort of joined up view of where people are going, what the possible priorities are, what the opportunities are, because it is really, really important. We are working together and reinforcing what each of us is doing. It's the ambition is, as I said before, is to take that resource and build on it with the framework that ministers are considering on the international relations strategy. So hopefully that provides some assurance.
Yep, thank you. And maybe, Carrie, have you had much conversation with the motor trade, particularly thinking of hydrogen power, hybrid, electric powered vehicles and stuff? Have you had conversations with any motor manufacturers?
On the business to business, I'm so sorry for jumping in there, but on the business to business side, no, but on the policy and regulation side, absolutely. So on the business to business side, that'll be Invest NI, linking in with potential Northern Ireland export into China.
Yeah.
But on creating that market access space, that's where I'm involved with the Foreign Office and Department for Business and Trade work alongside the Foreign Office to create that environment for increased market access for hydrogen power and EV vehicles, etc., into the market. Where that stands at present is we started off at the beginning of January last year with the Economic and Financial Dialogue between the UK and China, which set out the overarching parameters for trade in a number of areas, including green energy, hydrogen, EV. And we're then having a series of ongoing dialogues that go into the detail of what the policy should look like in terms of market access for China and UK respectively. And once those dialogues are completed, what we'll have is almost like a framework for how UK companies and Chinese companies can interact with each other's market. It isn't a trade deal. It's not called a trade deal, but it may well in itself be a basis for a future trade deal because there's so much policy and regulatory work going into this. So on the hydrogen side in particular, I've been raising this with Department for the Economy at that policy regulatory level. And then engaging from the information that I had into the Foreign Office policy folk who are holding the pen in China on this.
Yep, okay, thank you. Anything to add, Aidan?
Well, on your general point of business and who we connect with, so as well as what Tom has said, we will work with departments in two ways. We will sit on various groups and actually sit on some of their groups so we can update them, say, for example, on for the Department of the Economy. But we've also our own links, and all three of us have our own links, and we share information on the connections that we have with business, with civic society, with tourism, and invest, and all those things feed through to us to be able to give examples, to be able to have a better picture of what's going on at home. And honestly, part of the majority of our work is sort of promoting Northern Ireland, what we have to offer. But the other side of thing is to make sure that we are embedded within departments thinking, local government thinking, business thinking, that they understand the importance of the platforms that we have, and they actually understand the importance of us getting the information that they have, the views that they have, so that we can make sure that they're fitted into our thinking and are fully represented.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Timothy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose when I started looking at this and got to know a bit more about the bureaus, my train of thought was, is it value for money? What's the productivity? And it's following on from a comment there that Adam made. Is it add-on? Is that how you pronounce it? Aidan or add-on? Aidan?
Aidan in English, Aidan in Irish, whatever you fancy.
Aidan made about promoting Northern Ireland, and not wanting to labour the point, but if you can't promote yourself, I struggle to see how you're promoting Northern Ireland in the way that they should. And that social media piece is key and all that, of keeping us up to date what's happening, and giving us a train of thought of the type of events you're going to. Like any event you should be going to, picture what happened at it. You know, common practice in any organisation, especially in this building, it's something that's very important to keep your audience up to date of what's going on. But that's just a general, I don't want to get bogged down in.
If I could just respond very quickly to that. We produce, so social media, yes, I definitely take the point, and there are some discussions going on at the minute of how all three of us do that. But to represent Northern Ireland, it's those thousands of conversations we have every year. It's those, for example, 19 events, 6 cultural events, 7 policy events, 3 networking events, and 2 university students groups that we had in this past 11, 12 months. But it's also how we connect people. And again, going back to where we take our leads, of course, we'll take it from ministers, we'll also take it from departments, but it's those contacts that we have with civic, business, tourism, Invest NI, etc. that means that we can represent Northern Ireland. We also produce reports such as the one I'm sure you've read many times, the Brussels report, which comes out quarterly, which goes into all of our events, as well as a lot of legislative detail.
And I take your point, but you're limiting yourself to your audience, because people back home, you know, don't have an idea of what's going on in any of your offices. And that brings, yes, you can have all this engagement across where you're based, which is good, and that's, I suppose, what you're there for. But there's a key piece of that has to be of showing us its value for money, giving us confidence of what's happening in each of your offices. You know, Tom, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't want to get bogged down because I have questions I want to ask for each of the three.
It's actually it's a very, very valid point, and we accept that point. I think there's another thing too that's quite often been overlooked in the benefit of those offices, and ministers have highlighted that there's the potential to use the intelligence in the overseas offices to inform how we are taking forward our own priorities here. What does this mean, particularly from if we're trying to attract investment, if we're trying to develop skills here, what are the long-term trends, what's happening, how's that affected? So that two-way communication piece is really, really important, and in that context, as well as, you know, informing what's going on in the office, I fully accept that point.
Yeah, suppose starting off then, Richard, the Washington office. Very keen to understand what the working relationship is with the new administration. You know, obviously St. Patrick's Day passed in March, where we had the First Minister boycotting going to the White House. We also had the First Minister being quoted as saying that she would never agree with President Trump How do you feel that those comments and that boycott of the White Office has impacted the relationship that America has with Northern Ireland, and indeed what Northern Ireland has with America?
Just if you allow me, just to go back to I fully accept the social media, the media communication strategy piece fully, and we're going to make that a lot better, not just in terms of communicating back here so people understand what we're doing, but it's the only way we're going to reach audiences outside DC and into Canada. So the communication strategy has to be better. It will be better, and it'll face both directions. The relationship with the US is just as unique and amazing as it's ever been. That relationship has had ups and downs across different periods of time. And
what about the new administration? Like, we have for the first time a vice president that has strong links to Northern Ireland, J.D. Vance, where you could relate to Coke, Ulster Scots, and our first minister simply didn't want to turn up.
Yeah,
so that's bound to have an impact on our relationship with the administration. Instead of building bridges, it seems to me they're more interested in trying to put barriers up.
Well, we had the meeting. It's a relationship. It's the meeting with the president went ahead during St Patrick's Week as has been taken place in the past, and that's an amazing.
The Deputy First Minister.
It was Deputy First Minister, and we had the First and Deputy First Minister in North Carolina, and the states. The individual states are a huge part of our relationship with the US as well, and then we've got the relationship with Canada. So there's a whole raft of important relationships in there, as well as the ones which go on, between universities and everything else. So there's a whole range of relationships, and we've got very strong relationships on Congress. We work hard to maintain that access. We deal with both parties. One of the things that is a key objective for me is to grow the relationship into younger next generation leaders as well. So we look beyond as well as whatever administration is in power and the leadership of the opposition, we look beyond into next generation leaders and build those relationships. We've got the Washington Ireland programme to help us with that. The Association of Young Political Leaders is sending a delegation out to the States, which we'll be hosting events for. So building those next generation leader relationships are important, and I haven't seen any change in the appetite to engage with Northern Ireland. That's what we keep building on that interest, and the real challenge for us is how to use that relationship so we get a good hearing. What I think we need to get sharper at doing, and what I saw the First and Deputy First Minister doing in North Carolina and the other ministerial visits we've had, is about using those engagements to make the case for Northern Ireland as a research, where they visited North Carolina as a research triangle. So we're talking about the benefits of strategic partnerships between universities and the opportunities in tech and those kind of things. So it's using those relationships to leverage benefits for Northern Ireland, and we keep doing it very, very successfully.
The President's very strong on sovereignty and very strong on promoting America first. Yep. Has there been any suggestion that he would look less favourably upon Northern Ireland because of our position, where there's been a land grab with the EU? It's obvious he doesn't have a great relationship towards the EU. Has that had any impact?
That hasn't come out. I'd say that our focus is on growing so to the administration's overriding view at the minute in terms of America first and about investing into the United States rather than overseas investment. That's the sort of thing we're trying to support. That's where the Belfast chambers, that's why they're coming to New York to look at those opportunities to grow into US. That's a very administration friendly opportunity. So we continue to keep engaging very well on it. And to your point about the Vice President, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which you're aware of, is a massive opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
And the Communities Minister, Gordon Lyons, deserves a lot of credit for his engagement on that. Going back to October, we got in very early. We used our networks to connect in with the 250th Commission. He had very good meetings with them, and then that's built forward to memorandums of understanding, which he was then able to announce in March. So that's how the relationships work to develop something along with a change and those historic connections that we've always had, going back to the 250th.
Is there any potential, or will your office play any part in facilitating a visit potentially by either the President or Vice President to Northern Ireland?
If that invitation is made, we're there to support. As I said at the start, we're there to help with whatever decisions are made or whatever invitations are offered.
If I could move over to yourself, Aidan, a few comments. The two junior ministers obviously were out for the St Patrick's Day breakfast where they met with Minister Nick Thomas Symonds. Were you at that meeting, and do you know what was discussed at that meeting?
I don't, unfortunately. We were in the middle of the event, which featured around 190 guests, including member states ambassadors, bilaterals, MEPs, senior officials from the Commission, as well as regional and policy contacts, and also the DERA PermSec, before I forget. So I wasn't, I did the introductions, but I wasn't around for what was said. However, I do think it was advantageous not only to have the Minister for the Cabinet Office there before his appearance at the PPA, the Interparliamentary Group, but also before his chats with Commissioner Shevchevich later in the day, I believe.
Yeah. And are you aware of what topics were discussed at that meeting at all? Was there a brief? Was there a minute that was shared with yourselves?
No, it was an informal meeting around the breakfast, which actually we didn't know whether it was going to happen or not until pretty recently before it happened. So it was informal.
One of the frustrations with a number of us on the committee is unaware of what the junior ministers lead on, and I was hoping that if you could share some of the details of that meeting, it might give us an idea of the policy areas that they do lead on.
I wasn't party to the conversation, so I can't help.
Conscious that you still want to get to Kerry. Go ahead, Tom. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's probably not going to help clarify that point itself. It's just a general point about that breakfast and the value as a networking event. It is an event which is deliberately structured in a way it brings people together so they can have informal conversations. I think one of the great, I think it was a great reflection on the importance and the value that's attached to that breakfast that Minister Simmonds did actually turn up to that during what was a very, very busy programme in Brussels, and saw it as important to be there before he had his meeting with Shevchevich.
Thank you for that additional information.
So we have a 33-page report which has little to no mention of the protocol or the Windsor framework, and you have said that's a big part of your work out in Brussels. You also made the comment that a coffee and a smile gets you a lot further than a 30-page report. But can you give us some detail regarding your engagement in the Windsor framework from a unionist point of view? I believe it's been foisted upon us. We haven't got Brexit. What is the office's position over there? Is there an agreed strategy by the First and Deputy First Minister of how Northern Ireland is represented in Brussels?
So we are not just the office of the Executive Office, we are the office of the Northern Ireland Executive in Brussels. So we will work with all departments and all ministers and regularly have visits from those ministers. As far as on our engagement, it takes a couple of different ways. So the first part is that soft part that we talk about. It's the events, the trying to get new audiences in. It's trying to build those relationships. The second part is the more formal structures. Again, because we are not part of the EU anymore, we're not a member state, we're not part of the Council of Europe, we're not part of the Parliament, then we really have to look at those more formal areas, such as the Commission Work Programme seminar, such as the Joint Consultative Working Group, the specialised committee, and some of the more formal stuff that we do with the UK mission to the EU, including the structured subgroups, which not only do we sit on, but we facilitate other departments to sit on. As far as the coffee cup diplomacy, as I would call it, our guys here, and I'm really lucky to have the team, will talk about the policy issues that need talked about, that will that are current and in the zeitgeist, or that there are legislative changes happening in. And that sort of door opening, that sort of informal relationship is one of the ways, building trust, making sure that Northern Ireland's point is understood, but also being able to garner information on what is happening. Should it be on responses to tariffs and possible reciprocal tariffs, right through to dental amalgam, veterinary medicines, and tariff rate quotas. So it's not that there's everything is an informal discussion. It is more along the lines of that we have a balance between the very formal structures, the slightly less formal structures, and then the goodwill, trusting relationships that we have, not only with the EU and member states, but also with our colleagues in Cabinet Office, DEFRA, DBT, DESNES, UK Mission to the EU, FCDO, and even the Irish Perm Rep.
Okay, I'm conscious of time.
Yeah,
No, hold on. Tom wanted in on this point, and then I'm going to ask you to move on to Kerry because we're
just one quick point to make to Aidan.
Tom, go ahead first.
It's a very, very quick point, and it's back to the executive position. We work for on behalf of ministers. Any of the work that's done there, any of the messages, they're with the agreement of ministers. Where we don't have an agreed position, such as the Windsor framework, what we are very clear on is objectively we are setting out this position as it's seen in Northern Ireland and the issues to ensure that those are understood. And that's very much the role, and I think it's what Aidan and his team have actually excelled on over the last year or so in Brussels.
Aidan, just quickly, veterinary medicines, what's happening?
Well, there's still ongoing conversations. I think it would be imprudent for me to say where they are. I actually haven't looked at it for a couple of weeks, given that we were fully in swing of EU and UK talks. But I'm sure there is progress being made. I know that there have been, even over this past couple of weeks, talks between the EU and the UK. So I very much look forward to seeing what progress has been made.
Quickly then moving on to Kerry. So the First and Deputy First Minister met with the UK Chinese Ambassador back in May, and that took place in Stormont Castle. The TO refused to publish any notes of the meeting, arguing that it could harm international relations. Can you shed any light on that, and what international relations would be harmed by publishing notes of a meeting between an ambassador of China and our First and Deputy First Minister?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Gaston. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting, and that was an inward visit into the office, so it didn't fall under my purview. So apologies, I don't have any further information for you.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the exemptions we have under FOI, is that information can be withheld in terms of meetings themselves, and it's to protect the relationships itself, which sometimes are in the
At whose request?
I think, sorry?
At whose request, the First and Deputy First Minister or the Chinese Ambassador?
No, it's a test that's done. There is a process for FOI that's worked through, and there are various tests there as to whether something should be released or exempt, and then advice provided. I'll have to check, Timothy, on the position with that. I thought the notes of that meeting had been released.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Timothy, I'm going to bring Carol in. You have plenty of time there. Go ahead, Carol, please.
Thank you, and again, thank you all for your presentation. And the European paper was very detailed. There's lots of links on it, so I'm still, being honest, I'm still reading through some of it. It's just in terms of, and this isn't a criticism, it's just genuinely interested. See, in terms, there's been a lot of discussions around universities and businesses, and I understand that. But in terms of grassroots community groups, how do they get access? Like, I know, for example, there are some, and there have been some visits. In fact, there was a visit by the civil service in Europe and Brussels. But certainly in terms of grassroots groups, how would they get access? That's my first question. Maybe Egon, you want to answer that. But the other aspect that I want to ask all is, so are there any connections with any of the Irish government representatives, both in China and America? And again, you know, what collegiality is there in terms of trying to get wide investment in? And then my last point, Chair, is, and it's just really an observation. I understand Stuart asking the question about human rights issues in China. I mean, the same issue, same question could have been put about America and anywhere else. I get that, right? But what I would like to try and find out is, in terms of the particular piece for here, there are many, there are now 3 generation, well, there's the 3rd generation of children and family members of political ex-prisoners who are getting stopped from getting into America by Homeland Security. They have no convictions. They weren't even born when their parents were in prison. Some of these parents are involved in conflict resolution, indeed involved in the peace process. And the way in which these youngsters are being treated has been nothing short of horrendous. I don't know what representation, if any, can be made or has been made, but certainly they would be my questions. And sorry, Chair, the last one is probably for Aegon, is the Peace Plus funds in terms of the interests here and continuing the work here, that I believe our own experience has been an exemplar for other places that are trying to rebuild after conflict. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, go ahead. Shall start?
Yeah, just, I mean, for quickness, if I could pick up on the DFA
Yes, please.
links themselves, and just to assure you, Carol, all 3 bureau work very, very closely with their Irish Embassy and British Embassy colleagues. We also work very closely here in Belfast with FCDO and DFA colleagues, and one of the areas in that is building an understanding of what our objectives are, what we're trying to achieve internationally, so that that can be fed into their own networks where there's an opportunity for them to support ourselves in that too.
Okay, anybody want to pick up any other points? Go ahead, please, Richard.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, we want to support every part of anybody who's got an interest, and we do stuff. There's the Belfast Beltway boxing programme. We'll be hosting an event for them shortly, which gets young people from Belfast out to the States and connects on boxing. We host an event for NICFA during St Patrick's Week. We've engaged with Young Enterprise. Kieran Sheehan has been out doing fundraising. We've tried to support that. We engaged with the Flax Trust as well from your area. So anybody, again, it maybe goes back to the points that Timothy and Stuart were making about the communications thing. If we improve our communications out here and make people see what we can do, then, and the accessibility, the fact that you can pick up a phone, send an email, arrange an our Teams meeting, which has transformed a lot of this as well in terms of engaging with grassroots, and then look at opportunities and find partnerships. And as Thomas said, yeah, relationships with the both the British and the Irish embassies have been fantastic, and we benefit from their support significantly, because we're based in DC. It's a team of sort of 3.5 at the minute. For us to have reach across the US and Canada, if ministers are going to North Carolina, if they're going to Canada, we're engaging in Nashville. It's engaging with those consulates in those areas in particular, as well as the embassies in DC, which are so important to us. So we're very grateful for all their access and support and their willingness to open up their contacts and to work in partnership.
Okay, Aidan, did you want to come in next?
Yes, there was a few things there. First, as far as our connections with the Irish, yes, we do very closely work with them, the same we do the UK mission. But also, there's another one which kind of stands out, which is the bilateral. So the UK ambassador to Belgium and the Irish ambassador to Belgium, and we actually worked with them a couple of years ago on the 25th anniversary of the All Ireland Peace Park, which had about 400 of an audience, and was honestly is one of the most emotional things I've ever worked on, because it was young people who were coming together to rewrite a peace pledge after 25 years for what it meant now, and genuinely it was amazing. On the civic stuff, we have regular cooperation and conversations with trade unions, people in the justice field, children, Cooperation Ireland, women's groups, rural groups, and that's really, really important for us, because we need to be able to understand and also get across what are the issues in Northern Ireland that's affecting not just the economy but civil society, and that social part is very important to us. In fact, we actually have the Northern Ireland Housing Association of Housing Federations here with us today and tomorrow. They're going to use our space for meetings, and we'll host an event for tomorrow night on the role of housing associations in integrating communities in Northern Ireland and building peace. There's over 300 key contacts from member states, commission, parliament, policy experts who've been invited to that. And that leads me on to, your point on Peace Plus. There are people who ask the question, 25 years on, why does Northern Ireland still need support? And I think one of the things is because we have an ability now to show what we have done. And there are places, who looked to us on the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls programme, youth justice programmes, but also in areas such as business, communities coming out of conflict. Even, Ukraine has shown an interest in what we have done. We actually had the Minister for Regional Development the Deputy Minister for Regional Development from Ukraine just popped in because he had heard the good stuff that we were doing and wanted to have a conversation. So yeah, we have a lot of civic stuff, but we also use that to sort of translate into a stronger narrative about Northern Ireland being a collaborative, innovative and responsible partner who wants to share that good practice.
Okay, thank you. Kerry, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And just to talk a little on our Irish government relations. So, as you might imagine, it's a very close diplomatic community here in the Chaoyang area of Beijing. So we're very, very close to both the UK embassy and also the Irish embassy. I was actually at the Irish embassy just last night. We meet regularly through functions, events and meetings with the ambassador there, the deputy head of mission, the trade councillor and communications staff. And you talked about collaborative activity, and one of the events that I participated in last year, so in November, I joined Minister Murphy in the first ever joint North-South trade mission to Singapore for the FinTech conference. There was some fantastic opportunities coming out from that for both the attendees and future, not even work beyond Singapore in the FinTech space in terms of growing our services trade into China. So some really positive experiences of that. And actually, I would say that both the UK and Irish embassies more broadly work very closely together here in Beijing, with many of the same objectives around delivering economic growth.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's a long session. Yes, go ahead quickly.
Kerry, just to yourself, in the absence of being able to see what was discussed with the Chinese ambassador, it really falls to yourself. There's a lot of concern in Northern Ireland about the persecution of Christians out in China, and I would encourage you every opportunity to try and raise them concerns that we have here back in Northern Ireland. I hope that was raised in the meeting back in May, but when we can't see the minutes of it, I take it that it wasn't. So I encourage you to take every opportunity open to you to raise them concerns.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, please, Carol.
Sure.
Sorry.
It's just for clarification. So, should those points be raised with officials, or should they not be made to the first and deputy first? I mean, including the point that I made about impediments getting into America.
I was actually.
I don't think it's the officials' jobs to relay those, to be fair to them.
I was going to let our witnesses go and then maybe sort of discuss some actions for the committee as a result of this session, so we can pick that up in a little minute. But for now, thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. So
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll just take our ease for a minute just while we clear that. So we'll take a comfort break in a little minute, but we'll just tidy this session up. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we'll proceed. I'm sure it's just okay. So I remain concerned about the amount of money that has been spent in the last 10.5 years on the Chinese Bureau, and I'm conscious that even though there was some information provided today, I'm still not convinced that it's good value for money for the public purse. So I'm wondering, is there maybe something for us to refer this to the Northern Ireland Audit Office to see if they would look into this? It's about £250,000. I estimate that's been spent, and I'm just not convinced that we as a scrutiny committee can get to the bottom of whether it's a good use of public money. So I just wonder if anybody else has got any thoughts on that, or people support.
Sure.
Go ahead, please, Carol.
I think that just as a first step, we write to the First and Deputy First Ministers, outlining the concerns about value for money.
Okay.
I mean, I do understand, and I think Stuart made this point, it's very difficult for communication from China to here. I think the issue is the TO and all the other departments who are, got PR, press departments aren't using them. But in the first instance, I think we need to write to the First and Deputy First Minister with those concerns before we go to the audit office.
Well, I think it's fair enough, but I think I'm just frustrated that even the communication we received in advance of the committee meeting today, it's just not clear whether we will get that. But go ahead, please.
Actually, I agree with you. I think we do need to raise the costs and our concerns about that with the audit office. But I also take Carol's point.
Yes.
I think we should give the opportunity
Yes.
to the Executive Office to make a response. But I think the letter to them should indicate that it would be our intention to take these matters up with the audit office.
Yeah, and
We need a swift. We're not going to hang about for 6 months waiting for an answer to this. We want a quick answer. And I take also Carol's point about the range of issues that we discussed here and the questions which she has, and there are others. We can either include some of that in correspondence, and or when the First and Deputy First Minister come to us, those are areas for discussion with them in public.
25th of June.
Okay, so they're coming 25th June. Any other thoughts in terms of? Go ahead, please, Brian.
Well, in fairness to the operation in China, its annual budget is 237. In Brussels, it's 403,000, and in North America, it's 784,000. So it's noted. It's by quite a bit the least out of the three. It's less than a third of the North American one. I have heard this before. People, and I think part of it is political concerns and objections to relations with China.
Just be clear, it's
well,
not political.
Activity.
No. I just know from previous comments. I know political concerns, and people do have concerns about China, but we could also have concerns about other countries. It doesn't stop us having diplomatic relations. But I'm just commenting. You said if anyone wanted to comment, so
okay. Yeah.
But no, I certainly think. In all of these things, we need to see the evidence. We need to see what are the outputs from this, and we're right to ask for that there, and what is resulting from that presence.
Okay, yeah, but I just want to be clear that we aren't spending $250,000 plus in other countries every year. We're spending that money overseas, and we're not seeing any productivity, really, no real tangible output.
Well, I don't think that's a fair comment.
Well,
where was it?
Well, we in fairness, we were given with a page in front of us here. We have a report in front of us, and there was a whole range of things there.
Go ahead. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or any actions?
I'd be concerned about the three offices. Yeah. We can't see what they're doing. It's not hard to have a social media presence. I think in this day and age, it's very, very important.
Okay, so Carol, you wanted to raise the issue of young people, second, third generation, in terms of visas into the...
Yeah, so I mean, it may be something that we ask, just on reflection, it was probably unfair to ask the North American Bureau to deal with that, although I do think it's something they could perhaps raise through discussions, but certainly what we need to do is put that into correspondence to the First and Deputy First Minister. I mean, I know each country has its own controls, and that's down to them. But the reasons that some of the young people, and this is right across the whole community, that it's because of their grandparents' involvement or lack of, or even suspicion of it. And I think that's quite disgraceful, especially when a lot of young people are students and they're going to be paying that debt off for a long time and looking for employment opportunities. And it is something, you know, like 25 years after the Good Friday Agreement, this issue needs to be resolved. It's just really unfair. But the issue about the PR, Paula, I do think, I mean, the American Bureau has had no barriers put on it in the same way that China has, and its output is scarce.
Very poor.
And I do think there needs to be an overarching view
Yep.
or an approach about the PR and how, you know, taxpayers are seeing how their money's spent. Because we have no issue getting scrutinised, none whatsoever, and people like to put comments, nice or otherwise, but at least to see what we're doing.
Yeah.
Those bureaus in particular need to have that in mind as well. This is public money. I was actually quite impressed with the European presentation. I thought it was very detailed and I thought it was very informative. The other two didn't have any information, to be frank.
Okay, so I think the letter will go. I think it's maybe two separate pieces of thread we're pulling here. First of all, there's the value for money, the amount of money has been spent in the last 10 years or 5 years, whatever measurement they want to use in terms of actual tangible outputs. And then I think the thread around the entrance into the US, because as you just indicated there, it may not be involved.
Not sure that's a devolved matter, but we can find that out, and certainly then, if we can still write to FMDFM about it, but it could be that they will then have to make representations to the UK government. But we will find that out. Check, and I just add also, I had down, do we want to get I think Tom said that there was a draft communications plan that was being agreed at the minute between the three boroughs and should be published in the next number of weeks.
I picked that up next.
Yes, I wonder if it'd be worth us just asking for that when it is published. Fine, we can do that.
Sorry, just another one just on that. So this draft international relations strategy.
Yes.
It's only 11 years out of date.
We can ask.
So if we can include that in
yes,
terms
we'll
of
include
when
that.
that's going to happen.
That's no problem. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I had mentioned about to Kerry regarding concerns of persecution of Christians in China. So if you're writing off regarding entry into America,
okay,
that
that's fine.
Included.
I can include
that's a neat
no problem.
link.
Yes, we'll put that in the one letter.
Okay, members, we'll just take a 5-minute comfort break and then we'll resume in terms of our next agenda item.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Committee Room 30, sound. 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 Committee Room 30, sound.
Okay, members, we're back in open session, and just for the purposes of the video recording, we have just spent a couple of minutes talking about our report into gaps in equality legislation. So the Alliance Party and the SDLP have made a response so far, and the other parties are hopeful to get something in by this time next week, and then we'll take it forward from there. Okay, so thank you for your work on that to date, Clark and your team. So correspondence, and you'll find this on pages 137 to 146 of your pack for the summary of the committee correspondence. And I just want to draw your attention to a number of items. 8.2, so this is on pages 147 to 151. So Mid and East Antrim Borough Council have responded to the committee's request for details on the allocation of the local change fund in relation to ending violence against women and girls. The amount awarded under the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls Change Fund by the Council is £486, with the remainder used for administration costs. Details of the organisations who are successful for grants are also listed in the correspondence. So just ask your agreement to note this item and to seek your agreement to consider further action when we've got all the responses from all the councils. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so 8.3, 8.4 and 8.16 DFI, Justice Committee and DFC Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. So I'm going to refer you to pages 152 to 159 and pages 220 to 222 of the meeting pack. So just to advise, the Department for Infrastructure, the Justice Committee and the Department for Communities have all responded to the Committee's request for information relating to their roles in funding activities and activities relating to the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. So to date we have received responses from Health, Infrastructure, Finance, Communities and Justice. So just note, I'm asking you to note this correspondence and to seek your agreement to consider further action when we've received responses from all the statutory committees. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
8.6, so on pages 164 to 170 of your pack. So the Executive Office has responded to the committee's correspondence from the 14th of April requesting information on a trauma-informed approach in relation to historical institutional abuse. The Department has outlined how it is applied in TO and statutory agencies with BSS, the HIA Redress Board and COSIGA, the Commissioner's Office. So I'm asking you to note this correspondence and to seek your agreement to consider writing to VSS to congratulate them on becoming the first organisation here to be accredited with a silver trauma-informed working with trauma quality mark in recognition of their work in identifying and responding to the needs of victims and survivors. We agreed?
Great.
8.9, so we'll refer you to pages 178 to 185 in your meeting pack. So just to advise that the NI Assembly EU Affairs Manager has written to us with the annual report for 2025, and the report gives an overview of the withdrawal agreement activity, including meetings of the Joint Committee and specialised committees. Just to note this correspondence, seek your agreement to add the report as a relevant paper for the EU Matters Oral Evidence session that we will have next week. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, 8.10, the Executive Office Northern Ireland's response to the COVID-19 Inquiry Module 1 report. So this report is found on pages 186 to 187 of your pack. Just to get, so the Executive has approved the publication of its response to the UK COVID inquiry, and I just ask for you to note this and to seek your agreement to write to the Department to request that they keep the committee updated on the feedback once completed in response to the Module 1 recommendations. Okay,
Chair.
Go ahead please.
Sorry, I should have declared an interest because I was covering from June 2020 to December 2020 for Deirdre Hargey, and that was a period during COVID, so apologies for that. I should have done it at the start, but I forgot.
No problem. Thank you very much, Carol. No, that's noted by the. Thank you. Okay, 8.11, the pivotal report, achieving greater integration in Northern Ireland, young persons. Voices. So I'm just going to refer you to pages 188 to 202 of your meeting pack. So just to advise that the findings from this report are based on 5 focus groups involving 48 young people aged 15 to 25 across a range of communities in Northern Ireland. The report looks at young people's experiences of integration and division in education and their wider communities. So just to advise that Pivotal would welcome an opportunity to meet with the committee to talk about the issues and ideas in the research project about how to achieve greater integration in education, housing and communities. So I'm asking you to note this correspondence and to seek your agreement to arrange, in the first instance, an informal meeting with the clerk to discuss this work with a view to arranging a further briefing with the committee at a later stage.
Agreed.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the clerk then just to go through other items for noting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a number of other items to note, members. Item 8.3, the Executive Office's response to the committee's correspondence from the 11th of April in relation to the January and February outturn. Item 8.7 was an Executive Office news release of FM-DFM and the Minister for Education marking the beginning of construction of the Stroul Shared Education Campus in Omagh. Item 8.8 from the Head of the Civil Service, response to the committee's correspondence of the 14th of April regarding the King's Honours Awards. Item 8.12 is the 39th report of the ESR, the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and there are no rules for the attention of this committee in that report. Item 8.13, House of Lords Scrutiny Committee. Our committee was copied into correspondence to note from Nick Thomas-Simons MP regarding the European Commission work programme, and also item 8.14, again from the House of Commons Scrutiny Committee. This committee was copied into correspondence to note to Nick Thomas-Simons MP in relation to regulations of the European Parliament on the protection of geographical indications for craft and industrial products. And finally, item 8.15, Department for Communities, response to the committee's correspondence of the 14th of April regarding historical institutional abuse and personal independent payments.
Okay. I'm very conscious that months and months ago, when the TO officials were here, I asked specifically for information around expenditure to date on the mother and baby institutions, the research report, the Truth Recovery Design Panel, etc. And they sent something back which fell well short. So we went back again. We still haven't received that information. I wonder, can that be chased up again? Because I think it may have to be something that, I know that there's an individual involved in this process who is keen to put in a Freedom of Information request. So I think that we could go back again, but if not, I think that there's going to have to be another route for there's transparency around that, the expenditure in this regard.
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
And if you recall, I've raised several occasions about the money spent on SIB staff working on the end and violence against women and girls. I still haven't received that as well. Yeah. And I don't think it's satisfactory at all.
Okay.
Yes, Chair, we went back to, following the last communication we have gone back to them on that, but as of yet we haven't received anything back, so we'll chase that up as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other issues people would like to raise under correspondence? No? Okay, any other, draft programme, please, Sarah. I'm sorry, I'm running ahead of myself.
You're fine, Chair. So it's just one update in regards to a confirmed briefing for next week. So we will have a policy briefing from department officials on the Truth Recovery and Redress Bill, and that's going to take in closed session because the bill hasn't been to the executive yet. So that's why we can't do it in open session. And then we're going to have an addition, to next week regarding the Strategic Investment Board retention and disposal schedule. But I'll ask the clerk to speak on that more.
Yes, there is a relatively, this mandate, there is a new process in the way that committees actually look at retention and disposal schedules for arm's length bodies or other bodies within their departmental remit. They're almost treated like statutory rule, as in the committee has a period in which it would look at the retention and disposal schedule, and then if it wasn't happy about a particular aspect of it, it could technically pray against that before the end of the statutory period. So this is the first one that the committee has had of this. So I will contact the SIB directly, because there are over 50 different items within the retention and disposal schedule. And to be honest, I have no idea whether they feel right or not in terms of what they have decided to do with them. I'll contact them and get a written briefing off them, which I can bring then to the committee at the next meeting. If the committee then feels that it wants more information, we can obviously invite officials in to talk to it more if needs be. But we do have a 10-day sitting period to do this, so we have 4 weeks in which to do it. So it's like an SR.
Go ahead, please.
Just briefly, do Crony not also have a role to play in this as well, in respect of saying when? And clearly, we should be taking advice from them.
So the process actually, each retention and disposal schedule from whichever body it is goes to 2 committees. It goes to communities who have the PRONI element of it, and then it comes to the relevant remit committee. So as a committee, this committee will look at it and make a decision on it. At the same time, communities committee will look at it and make a decision on it. And then based on that, I will liaise with communities committee to make sure that we have the same view on it, and then take it from there. So yes, PRONI do have a responsibility, but that comes through the communities committee as opposed to us.
Okay, sorry, but how then are we really supposed to? How do we have the necessary skills to make these decisions?
And yes, that is a good point, and Chair. That is why I will go back to the SIB and ask them to give us the information that will allow us to make a decision on this. However, we can also seek input from the communities committee, who obviously deal with PRONI.
Okay, well, we can pick some of this stuff up next week.
But we'll pick it up next week. Yeah.
Okay, please continue.
That's everything, Chair.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, members, any other business? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Just say.
That's it, rules.
Just that we're adjourned.
Okay, so the meeting's now adjourned, and we'll be meeting next Wednesday at the same time, 2 o'clock in this room. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great.
Committee Room 30, sound.